Hi, Dr. Herrewynen. Thanks for joining us today. We've been talking to some doctors and clinicians and practitioners that use AVE in their practices, and we wanted to talk to you about that. So do you know how long you've been using our devices in your practice?
About 10 years, a little over 10 years. I was remembering it with certain children that I worked with, and yeah, it's about 10 years because I know how old they are now. They're in university.
And Debbie, maybe you can tell us a little bit then about how you're using AVE in your practice and stories that you have to share with us.
Well, when I first started using audio-visual entrainment, I started with a David Delight Pro, and it has both the audio-visual entrainment and the Cranio-Electro Stimulation. And I used it, of course, with my own self and with my children. And I used it and found that there was a substantial change in my children's, my son's specifically, he has ADHD, his ability to focus and be on task and continue staying on task. The teacher remarked there's a tremendous change in him. In fact, so much so that he actually took me aside and said, "What have you been doing differently? Like, what's happened? Did you do something else?" And I said, "Yeah, we started using audio-visual entrainment." And he said, "I wasn't sure if you'd put him on medication, but he didn't show any of the other signs that people have when they're on medication, so I wasn't sure what you did." So that was how I first started using it. And then I started using it in my practice. And I find that audio-visual entrainment gives people a real sense of having had their mind sort of shifted a bit. But cranio-electro stimulation is just this nice constant shaping of the emotion and calming of the mind. And so while I do really advocate using audio-visual entrainment, most of the time people will comply more by using the cranio-electro stimulation because they can keep you doing another task while they're putting the ear clips on their ears. Did you want to show, Marianne?
Yeah, I use the Cranio-Electro Stimulation a lot. I use it almost every day and have for 9 years now.
Yeah. And there's other staff members, like people like to use them here in our office because, like you say, Debbie, you can still continue doing other tasks, working quietly at your desk, whereas the entrainment, yeah, is very effective. It does require, finding a quieter place and taking that time out.
Yeah, and most people, I say them, half an hour out of your day. Most folks will, if they're desperate enough, they'll do it for a while, but they don't keep doing it over and over and over. So when my son was young, he had no choice. I just put it on him in the morning and he had no choice. So that's why I was amazed at how much of a change it made in him over the period of about 6 months when I used it daily with him. In fact, I'm quite sure that it shifted his mind at a very young age when he was able to develop and actually use that focus and use that attention in school. It actually shaped his mind and maximized his potential cognitively. I use it also in my practice with mood and with changing mood. It's a powerful mood shifter.
Yeah, and I also believe, Debbie, that you've told me that you use the AVE with veterans that you see.
I do indeed. Many of the veterans I work with have been in combat, and they've been overseas and they've been injured in combat. And so parts of their body, often in their shoulders and their legs and their spine, it's been tremendously damaged, and in a way that's traumatic. So it's not just that, I had an accident or something, but it was like like there was death and destruction everywhere. So when they remember the pain, it's connected to the trauma. So it affects their mind and their disability both. And so audio-visual entrainment does a couple of things. Sometimes I'll have them use the sub-delta. So they put the clips on their ears and then they can have a relief from the pain. So that's a powerful one. They can actually live their life and have freedom from the pain. The other part is they can put the stickers. There's a micro electro 10 setting. They can put the stickers on their body. For example, one fella, his shoulder was blown up and he couldn't write very well in his education. So he was being retrained, but it was very hard for him to get retrained because he was having a hard time focusing and then writing the answer because he was in a lot of pain while he was writing. So he'd do okay for the first little bit of the test, and then the pain would take over and his mind would sort of drift to sort of managing the pain, and he didn't do as well as he could have. And then gave him the sticker kit, microelectrode 10s. His marks are in the 90s right now. Yeah, they're really, really, really amazing. Now, most of these veterans, they struggled with school when they were younger. They got their marks in the 50s and 60s because that's why they went into the Army to begin with. So they did not have good marks to begin with. Don't think, oh yeah, these kids were great in their education when they were younger. No, they weren't, because that's why they went into the Army. And so to have them doing really well, getting strong 80s and high 90s, it makes them feel like they're Superman, like they've unleashed a part of themselves that they never thought they had.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also had a veteran who was studying, and he had the view hole eye sets. We got one pair of those?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Marianne's got a pair here.
Yes. Haha. So he would put that on the brain brightener setting and focus and remember all of the new information that he was learning. And he's doing remarkable. Right now, he's earning 6 figures in a job that's an executive job, and he's responsible for a lot of folks underneath him. He's doing remarkable. And that's because he was able to accumulate all of this knowledge really quickly. And then because he's really well organized in his mind already and very disciplined, he was just able to maximize his potential with just that little bit of help. So that's what I find with a lot of folks, if they're using the device regularly. And I think that's one of the main things that I find with my veterans, is that they will use the device regularly. They'll comply, and I'll tell them, look, put rub red on rub right, clip it on and go. And they do. They do.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And I know some of the other settings that we have on the Delight is the happy face, the mood booster ones. I know that that's my personal favorites. I don't know if you use those in your practice.
I do. I've used that several times. Sometimes people have had an AVE reaction, so they've had a really difficult session with me, and they feel really upset because they had to discuss some events that have really been troubling them. And so instead of sending them home upset, I put them in my weight room and put them on the happy face setting and turn down the lights, and then their mood just shifts completely, and they're much calmer and much happier, and they're able to see things a little differently too. I remember talking to Dave a while back, and he said, psychologists often think that they have to, people have these suitcases of difficulties that they carry around with them. And he said, what I think a lot of psychologists don't realize is you don't have to open up the suitcase and pull out each item and talk about it. You can just dump the whole suitcase out. So I think sometimes when people use these audio-visual entrainment and the Cranio-Electro Stimulation, between sessions, their suitcases dump out, and they don't even have to go through each item in their suitcase and, discuss everything. They actually feel much better. I'll have people, even my veterans will say, oh, actually, I'm feeling really good. Well, previous to this, and I've been in practice now for over 20 years. So previous to that, people would come back to me and they'd say, well, it's okay, but life's tough. It's not great. And they didn't see me, for a while. They'd say, well, if you're on break, it's kind of tough. Now I go away for summer, and they're saying, yeah, it's actually fine. It's all right. I'm doing really well. I've got my audio-visual entrainment, my Cranio-Electro Stimulation. I'm doing well. So that makes me really glad, because that means they can improve their lives sufficiently and continually on an ongoing basis. And happy face setting really helps to shift their mind sort of to a positive future focus.
Yeah, and I really like it too, because it has like the calming, like the alpha, and it also has that beta component. So I find for me, if I'm using it, that when I'm done, I'm like, oh, that was wonderful. But then I say, oh, but I feel like getting up and going and doing this.
Yes, right. They're future focused. They're like, okay, I'm going to go and do this. That's right.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Did you have any other stories that you want to share with us in your practice, or?
I have a lot. I had a situation where somebody was having a panic attack, and I've used this with some Canadian forces that are currently serving. and they've had panic attack, and they've been off work because of panic attack. And I clipped the 100 hertz setting on their ears with Cranio-Electro Stimulation, and it's in a few minutes. I just tell them it's kind of like your brain just sort of goes, oh well, and you're able to marshal your mind to have the cognitive override that you need to actually bring down a panic attack. Most folks can tell themselves it's okay, but it doesn't seem to feel okay, even when they're having a panic attack. And this gives them the power to actually bring down their anxiety and marshal those, positive thoughts that somehow they haven't got a hold in their mind. They just sort of slip off. And now with the that setting on the 100 hertz setting with the Cranio-Electro Stimulation, it brings down the panic attack, and they're able to govern themselves, which they feel incredibly powerful when they're able to do that.
And so easily, or seemingly so easily, yeah.
I really like the 100 hertz setting. I've been using it for almost 9 years, almost every day. And I used to have a lot of highway driving anxiety because I'd been in some accidents when I was younger. And now I drive all over the place. I drive back and forth to Calgary all the time on the very busy highway. And I drove to Jasper and back during a long weekend. And I was very calm.
That's wonderful, Marianne.
Yeah, I remember you saying that you have worked with some businesses.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been doing recently is doing workshops. And so I go to different businesses, and I, teach them about all these important concepts about how they can improve productivity in their workplace, and how, workers' mindset is really important, and it can improve their efficiency. And then we go through all these really great concepts. And then I talk to the owners afterward, and I say, it would really help if they could have some of this gear of Mind Alive available in their lunchroom, because then, or even just in the executive offices, and people can, sign it out like a library. And they're like, yeah, you know what, we could do that. And then I tell them how much the devices are, and they're like, oh, it's not even worth worrying about. That's just it's a small amount compared in a corporate structure. And so they're able to make that available to their employees, either on site, or they sign out the device to the employee as they're having difficulty. And it's been made a remarkable improvement in their employees' mind focus, in their ability to govern themselves and overcome, say, short terms of lowered mood and depression, short terms of anxiety. Sometimes people just have a hard time focusing on a day, and this can really help workplace safety. So this has been a tremendous help with the corporations that I've worked for. And, sometimes people just need a little nudge. They don't need a huge shift. They just need a little nudge.
Nice little alternative or new way to have coffee break.
Yes. Instead of loading up on sugar or loading up on some nicotine product, they are able to actually shift their mind directly. And it makes such a huge difference of being able to feel like they have personal power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So Marianne, did you have any other questions for Deb this morning?
Do you have any other success stories that you'd like to share?
Well, I do have a couple of times I've worked with folks and used the transdermal Cranio-Electro Stimulation, where you put the pads in the actual brain. And that actually works really well for something like bipolar. So bipolar is one of those trickier things to treat in session. It's something that most folks use they refer them out for pharmaceutical medication. And in-session treatment has been mostly just dialectical behavioral therapy. They don't really have a whole lot more that they've used for for bipolar, but transdermal Cranio-Electro Stimulation can make a huge difference for folks, and to help them feel like they can govern themselves. So you can use it here, and it makes a big difference for the person themselves to feel like, okay, so if I have, my mind starts racing and my mind starts to, do these cycling, manic cycles on me, I can pull it out of that cycle, and I can calm it down. And so when they start to recognize that, they can govern themselves, which it makes a huge difference, right? Rather than being on daily medication all their lives forever, which has a lot of side effects. A lot of folks really resist continuing on their medication because it has a huge change to their libido, their life, sort of love of life. But they can't live, their parents and their families can't live with them being manic either. So it's been a real life changer for a lot of people, being able to have that option to govern their mind and use that on themselves. That's a little trickier though. People don't always like to put pads on their brain. So often it's something I have to do as a clinician, but at least they know that the option is there. And that's been a real huge shift. I think that's been one of the lesser used ways that people can use it in a practice. But if you get the training for it, it really can make a huge difference in people's quality of life.
Yeah, well, it's nice to have options too, like different options that you can use, modalities. Yeah. So, well, Debbie, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us this morning and sharing some of your stories with us. And like I say, just being such a great advocate for Mind Alive. And we just really appreciate all that you do and having you in our world.
Oh, thank you. I think our world would be better if we had Mind Alive products on every display in every pharmacy across our nation, because it would make a difference in not only people's mental health, but in their physical health too, because a lot of the pharmaceuticals aren't good for our bodies in other ways, and this would make a huge shift in people's ability to govern themselves and feel like they have power over their own lives.
Great idea. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks again.
Bye.
We'll talk again. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.